Back in January of this year, Retro Games and plaion revealed their next big thing, or little thing, I guess, the 400 Mini. This is a plug-and-play emulation console in the form of a scaled-down Atari 400 8-bit home computer. Now, I got my hands on the 400 Mini a few weeks ago, and as an avid Atari 8-bit computer user through the majority of the 1980s, I've been throwing myself into everything this little unit can do to bring back the fun of the Atari 8-bit software library. And now, finally, in this review, I can share it with you. We'll get going right after this.
This video brought to you in part by Tommy and the Order of Cosmic Champions. This exciting and heartwarming coming-of-age Gen X novel is available now. Check the link for more info.
Hey there, welcome back to GenXGrownUp. I'm John, and I am a GenXGrownUp. Thank you for clicking on this video review. Now, as noted, I've been playing with the 400 Mini for weeks now. And though I was working toward this review, I can tell you I've been genuinely having a great time. I've been playing with it so much, in fact, that I find myself humming the menu music that you hear when you're selecting and configuring games. So it's only appropriate that for this review, we ditch this music and play the 400 Mini's music as the bed for the remainder of this review. Hey, if it's gonna be stuck in my head, it's gonna be stuck in yours too. Okay, in this video, we'll unpack and set up the system, explore the interface and features, test out the CX stick, connect our own keyboard, see how to add our own games for all supported systems, explore the basic programming language environment, and finally, weigh the pros and cons and give it a rating. Now, that's a lot, so let's go ahead and get started. Look, I don't want to waste any more time than we have to looking at the box. We've been drooling over the box for weeks. We know what it looks like. Just a couple of things I want to point out. Over here on the end, you have information about what's inside the box, including the full games list, if for some reason you hadn't discovered that yet. And on the top of the box, we have this really cool collage of all the devices that you can emulate with this. Of course, we know the 400 itself, the 800, the same thing basically, the XL line, the XE line down here, the 5200, and the XEGS. Look, this is a snapshot of this entire family of devices that now, under this one box, we're going to be able to emulate and enjoy once again. And then lastly, a quick peek at the back of the box. It just highlights some of the more notable games that are included on here. There's M.U.L.E, there's Miner, Millipede, Bruce Lee, Berzerk, and a little more information about the CX stick that we talked about a little earlier. Okay, let's get this thing open and check it out. Once you get everything free from its packaging, here's what the box contains. We have the 400 Mini herself. There she is. Here's this intriguing CX stick with all the extra buttons. Ooh, there's a button there and a button there. That's going to be cool. Look, they include an HDMI cable and a USB-C cable, but they're in the same dirty beige color as the 400, the mold for the thing. And so every cable of this I have is either black or white, and now I have some cool matching ones to go with my 400 Mini, and this little quick start guide to get you going with the system. Now, I'm a little notorious for throwing away instructions, but not on cool things like this, certainly not before I've taken a look at them. And this quick start guide is not really a full manual. It's kind of just an overview of all the ports and everything you're looking at on the console and on the stick itself, and a QR code where you can go and see a more comprehensive set of instructions for things like how to add more games via the stick. Yeah, we'll take a look at that. Turning next to the brains of the operation, here is the 400 Mini console itself, and it is little and it is cute. Verifying some things we knew leading into this, the cartridge door does not open, that's just cosmetic. I don't think a cartridge would even fit in there if you tried. The keyboard also is just cosmetic, not even the option select start buttons. Those are mapped either to your controller or to your optional keyboard that you plug in. Now, the keys themselves aren't just printed on here, they are raised, just like the original old membrane keyboard was. So if you run your fingers across it, it feels like the 400 keyboard, it's just not a functional 400 keyboard. Down on the front, we have the 4 controller jacks. They're all USB-A. Then around on back, we have an additional USB-A for, oh, I don't know, a keyboard or a USB stick for expansion. HDMI out. Here's the USB-C power in. Cables included. Power brick is not. You'll need to supply that. And then we have a power on-off switch right there. And down here on the bottom, we have this little info badge. There's your power voltage requirements, 5 volts, 1 amp. And oh look, my serial number is 103. That feels pretty early. That's cool. One common question I saw is just how big is the 400? I mean, you can't tell from the box. It looks bigger in some photos and smaller in others. So I brought in some comparisons. Here is the C64 Mini that Retro Games put out not too long ago. And here is the A500. You can also compare it to that. Now, these are both comparably scaled down versions of these favorite home computers. I don't know if the scale is exactly the same, but if you have these, you can definitely take a look at these. It's about just a little shy of the depth of the 500. And yeah, a little deeper than the C64. And then we have the CX stick. So this is the custom joystick designed to work with the 400 Mini, but not exclusive to it. It works with Windows and Mac and Linux and all kinds of things. I saw many people asking, just how close is it to an original joystick? Well, there you go. Here's an original CX40 from the early 80s, and here is the CX stick. Cosmetically, pretty much the same controller, but this one has a few more tricks up its sleeve. First and foremost, this is a USB controller, not a 9-pin, so no barrier of entry to plug this into your Windows, your Mac, your Linux, your VCS, whatever. In fact, there's nothing I plugged this USB into that it was not recognized, and in many cases recognized as what it was, the CX stick, as you see here in Windows. Around back, the subtle differences become more obvious. Here's a home and a menu button here on the back. You even use those in tandem sometimes. And here on the corner is a little shoulder button, just kind of built into the housing of the controller. And then back around here on top, just as we were anticipating the CX stick in a previous video, each of these cardinal directions, top, east, west, and south, are buttons. So those are mapped inside of the 400 Mini for different functions depending on the game. They might be start and select an option. They might be particular keyboard buttons, space, or whatever is needed. And for games you add, you can actually map them where you want them. And then one more view here for comparison. Here's the 400 Mini next to the CX stick. In some of the publicity photos, it looked like the stick just dwarfed the system. And it definitely has a larger footprint than you would with a regular 400, but not outlandishly so. And the two complement each other really well. Just seeing this beige beauty here next to this legacy joystick just makes me want to play some 8-bit Atari games. So I say we plug this thing in and do exactly that. So here we are booted to the main interface of the 400 Mini. Now in my scenario, I have my CX stick connected, but I also have my USB keyboard connected. Now this is a keyboard that I actually put custom Atari decals on across the keycaps just to make it a little more Atari-ish. Now before we play a game, it's a good idea to kind of configure the system and understand navigation. And really across the bottom, they're very clear about what everything does. So if you tap up, that's going to be help for the current game you have selected. Full controller map to show you what everything does. And down, you can see that South Special Actions gives you a peek at what else is available if you hold down a combination of buttons. Next across is saved games. So down on the stick goes into save games. Now it opens up this tray that looks like the top of the 400 plus 4 Atari cartridges. And each one of those can be a save slot. We'll show you saving a game here in just a moment. Top gets you out of most any menu. Speaking of menu, tap the menu button on the back of the CX stick and you go into the overall console options. Now display options, probably the most important. I have found that I prefer pixel perfect. I prefer CRT effect on. And they have these cool little frames, and there's one that I tend to like. Kind of, there we go, kind of a pixely background. Sure, top button gets you out of there and out of there. You can change the language of your console if you'd like to change that at any time. Of course, I'm not going to. And then you have some advanced options, and in here you have things like, how loud is that background music? Well, I've turned it all the way down since it's the background music for this entire video. In addition, you can get some system info about, what's the current build. You can shut down the device if you'd rather not do it from the button. Pages and pages of legal notices about all the games and all the licenses and everything, if you'd like to read that. And then, of course, you can always factory reset this, which I think is the only way to switch it between PAL and NTSC. Although I guess if you're connected via HDMI, you don't much care about that. But that's available here if you'd like to kind of start from scratch. And keep in mind, doing a factory reset, as it warns, resets everything. It gets rid of all your saved games, everything that you've done to customize your 400 Mini, of course. So we'll hit top, 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 and we're all the way back to the main menu. That kind of functions as the back button most of the time. Before we jump in a game, two more things. You can favorite a game. It's actually a rating. So using left, or west, I should say, on the ring will let you cycle through a rating for this game. And then using the right will let you sort all of the games by author, by genre, by year, by publisher, by favorite, or then back around by title, which is the default. So let's jump into Berzerk and show you the experience. So Berzerk is up and running immediately. All the loading time is taken away, but what about all the buttons? Now, I could use my keyboard, but if you don't have that, by the way, that does work just like it would if you had a real Atari. But if you tap the home button on the back of the stick, it's going to pause your game, suspend it here in the corner, and then you can review more information. So tap up on the controller. There we go. So the menu button over here is option. I can see start is the east on the stick. This doesn't map to anything. These are both fire. Okay, well now I know. Tap home again, and I'm right back into the game. And this is start. And it started. There we go. And we're playing Berzerk.
The humanoid must not escape.
So our game is going pretty well, but we want to save this position. So home button, and then down on the stick goes right into the save slots. Where would you like to put it? We'll drop it in slot 1. And then once you have it there, west on the ring, we'll lock that so that it doesn't get overwritten inadvertently. And then just tap the button to continue from there. Ah, here comes Otto. Get out of here. So at any time, drop back to the menu by tapping home. It's going to suspend Berzerk up here, whatever you were playing. Additionally, you'll see one more indicator that shows a picture of a cartridge and how many save game slots you have used versus how many of the 4 are available to you. And keep in mind, these save game slots are for all the installed games, plus every single game you might add to it. Fully capable. So here I fired up Flip and Flop, a game that I have featured on a previous video and one that I enjoy playing quite a bit when I was a youngster with my Atari 8-bit. And let me show you how the rewind feature works. Now, if you don't remember how to do it, no problem. Jump out to the menu, and let's take a look at the options, and south will tell me, oh, looks like home, back here, plus left on the stick activates the rewind. Also, home and menu on the back of the stick is going to be the virtual keyboard. I don't think we need it right now. We'll get to that. So let's go back in the game. Home and left, and there we go. It jumps into the game from when we booted it. At any point we want to continue, let's say we want to start right there. Gives you a 3-second countdown and resumes the game. That's great. I saw someone ask in the comments, can you disable the rewind? You can't, but nor will you hit it accidentally since it requires you holding this button and then left. So rewind a little bit. Let's start from there. 3, 2, 1. And again, this works not only on the 25 pre-installed games, but all the games you add as well. One more little detail in the interface before we move on. Way over here on the left is a number of players indicator, which tells you how many players you can play with this game. Although I found that to not be fully accurate. Missile Command, I think you can have multiple players. Miner, you certainly can. It says 1. Millipede says 2. M.U.L.E is, up to 4, so 2+. And we just played Flip and Flop, which I know can be at least 2 players, and it says 1. So don't trust that. You can probably play more players than it says there. Hop in the game and find out. Now, before we move on, I want to try to kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. I had many people ask about the video output quality and ask about the PAL emulation, specifically related to sound. So here is a direct output capture of M.U.L.E with its great soundtrack in NTSC. And for my friends overseas, the same game running with a 400 Mini configured in PAL mode. Now, hopefully that comparison has given you the information that you need in terms of audio-visual quality. To my eye and ear, it's certainly better than any Atari 400, 800 that I used to use hooked up to a CRT TV. It's just the way I see and hear it when I play it in an emulator. And so the output for the 400 Mini, for me, is as good as or better than anything I'm currently using to emulate Atari 8-bit software. Now, I don't think it's a spoiler alert to say that if you bought the 400 Mini and plug it in and only play the 25 included games, you're only taking advantage of a fraction of what this little unit can do. But before we expand it and add to what it can do, let's explore some of the games that come preloaded. Asteroids, of course, an Atari classic. The version here is pretty weird and I would argue not as good as it is of the 2600, though there is a 4-player variant that you can take advantage of since the 400 Mini has 4 controller inputs. But if you're looking for 4-player fun on the 400 Mini, I would argue there are better choices. And speaking of better multiplayer experiences, M.U.L.E is on here. Look, if you don't know M.U.L.E and you've not played it before, this is almost worth the price of admission to get an easy way to play 4-player M.U.L.E in HDMI on your TV. Somehow, this game takes the otherwise boring economics of buying food and energy and maintaining stuff and turns it into a cutthroat strategic game that'll have you punching your buddy in the shoulder as you play. M.U.L.E on the 400 Mini, or anywhere, frankly, is not to be missed. Of course, Star Raiders 2 is here. Now, I know many people lamented the original Star Raiders wasn't included. We can add that, of course, and we will. This was originally going to be a Last Starfighter game, and if you squint really hard, it still looks like a Last Starfighter game, and it's a lot of fun. And you'll notice this is one of the first titles that makes real use of remapping the controls around the ring of the CX stick. I have a button to go to my galactic map. I have a button to switch my shields on and off. I have a button to change from lasers to bombs. All that's right there on the stick. Now, if you want, you can enable those functions directly from an installed keyboard, but if you don't have one, for these 25 pre-installed games, they've done a really good job of mapping all of those commands that you need for these games right to buttons on the CX stick. And of course, you can always pop up that controller map and find out what those controls are if you forget them. Another one to keep an eye out for is Wavy Navy. This is kind of Space Invaders, but you're on the ocean. Lots of waves are coming through, and you've got to pay attention because sometimes there are mines, sometimes there are bombers, sometimes these helicopters come down and they have a machine gun after you. And it's a creative twist on the kind of fixed shooter. I would call it a fixed in the waves kind of shooter. Wavy Navy, I think it's kind of a little-known game, but I'm really happy to see it here in the Mini. And we've got this version of Battlezone. I don't even remember having Battlezone on the Atari 8-bit, but it's here. I'm not sure where this port came from, but it's pretty true to the original arcade game, but I would say the original arcade game, without having that periscope and those dual tread controls, Battlezone loses something in the translation, and I get that it was an early Atari game and it's worth having here, but it's not one of my top 25 for sure, so give it a try and see what you think. You've also got Boulder Dash on here, and that's another Atari 8-bit classic that, in addition to playing the regular game, there are so many expansions to Boulder Dash and toolkits to let you build your own levels with Boulder Dash. This is a game that kind of took on a life of its own, and there are still ports being made for mobile and other places that take that original mechanic of digging through this kind of dig-duggy world, collecting diamonds and moving around these giant boulders as you take on the role of Little Rockwell, your protagonist who's got to stay alive and get to that exit. Bristles is another one that I thought nobody else but me ever heard of, but you take on the role of a little painter. Bristles refer to the bristles of a paintbrush. You've got to paint all the walls, dodge all the bad guys, collect all the treasures, and then along the way, you're getting this set of clues that ultimately are going to spell out something. You know, there's this sort of overarching story or maybe just a puzzle going on. It's something you can do with computer games that you just didn't do in early console games or arcade games because you can take the time and play it for longer periods of time. Another one certainly worth pointing out is Jeff Minter's Hover Bover. If you loved mowing the lawn, you're going to love it even more when you get to borrow/steal your neighbor's lawnmowers. Try to mow the lawn while dodging all the flowers, sicken the dog on your neighbors as they come out to try to reclaim their lawnmower. Like any Jeff Minter game, this is kind of in a class by itself. It's a weird game, but if you like the mind of Jeff Minter, Hover Bover is a representative example of the kind of interesting games that put you in a world beyond just what the game is. Try Hover Bover. I think you'll dig it. And the last one that I think is really worth pointing out is Lee. Now, this was originally called Bruce Lee, but because of licensing purposes, it's been rebranded as just Lee. You take on the role of a martial arts fighter, Lee, totally not Bruce Lee. In this case, you will run, jump, and climb your way around a multi-screen map, collecting lanterns, defeating ninjas and this big green guy, eventually making your way to the evil wizard's fortress, and finally defeating him if you have the skill for it. This Bruce Lee game is right up there with Conan for me, and it's one I would have added to my 400 Mini if it wasn't here, but thankfully, it is. Those are just some of the highlights and also some lowlights of the 25 pre-installed games on the 400 Mini. But as we said, that's only part of what you can do with it. These surely aren't the best 25 games out there, and we know why. It's a licensing issues and what they had available, and heck, they had to change Bruce Lee to include it. So next, let's expand our 400 Mini to let it do way, way more than just these 25 games that come pre-installed.
Unlike many of the emulation gadgets we look at here on GenXGrownUp, the 400 Mini doesn't hide its bring your own game expansion behind any secret handshakes or special folders. The ability to add software was featured prominently in the launch video, and the process is well documented in the manual you can download from Retro Games' site. So before we jump into that, I'd like to take just a moment to plug our merch store, where we have hundreds of cool and nerdy designs spanning games, computers, movies, and pop culture that you can get on a t-shirt, a magnet, a sticker, a phone case, a mug, whatever. So please head over to genxgrownup.com/merch the next time you or someone you like needs some retail therapy. And as an added bonus, each purchase goes to support future videos just like this one. Now, let's expand the 400 Mini, shall we? All you need is a USB stick formatted as FAT32 and some Atari images. These can be cassettes, cartridges, discs, or whatever, plus, of course, your 5200 ROMs if you want to do that. You can drop these in the root of the stick or organize them in folders, keeping in mind there is a 256 file viewing limit for each folder. Now, plug the stick into the 400 Mini and power it on. With the stick plugged in, you'll see a brand new entry in your carousel of available games, and here it is, Media Access. Just hop in there, and now we can see the entire file structure of all the games that you've added to that stick that you now want to play on your 400 Mini. So let's start with probably the most requested game that's not already pre-installed in the 400 Mini. Let's go check out Star Raiders. Once you find a title you like, you just tap the fire button. It's now the current media, and I can configure it from there. Let's start by hitting the home button. So much configurability. I can determine what type of machine I'm going to play this on. Is it a 130XE, a 4, an 8? We'll get to 5200, enable basic or not. You even have some customization in terms of display width and height and the offset if you need it. We can come back to that. And then there's this biggie down here. Look at this. Map the controls. A full interface for remapping your controller for this game. Now, right now you can see it has fire, option, start, select, and that's on there. But Star Raiders needs all kinds of buttons. I have a keyboard here, but if I didn't, well, I need like a S for shields. How would I do that? Hit my fire button. Now I can map joystick commands, but if I tap south, now I can map keyboard commands to the joystick. So in my example, maybe I want to put S here for shields to the east. So I'll just say, let's skip until I get to that position. Key select, and I want that to be an S. Boom, it's now an S. And when you're done, out. You can map the entire controller, every direction, every button, to anything on either a joystick or the keyboard. Now, I prefer to play Star Raiders with the keyboard, but you don't have to. You have that ability. And then to start the game, you just tap home, and off you go. And we're playing Star Raiders. So I can push start here. There we go. I can hit G for galactic map, or I could have mapped G here to the controller. Maybe I want to go here. And let's hyper warp. Look at my 4 view. There we are. Let's turn on the shields. Let's turn on the nav computer. And we're playing Star Raiders. It's all here. You can map it however you want. Keyboard, joystick, it's up to you. What about speed? Oh, speed 4 is probably pretty good. Oh, still one more bad guy. Where's he at? He's out there. Get him! Got him. And just like with pre-installed games, if I tap the home button, this will suspend my game in the corner. And if I hit down, I have access to 4 game save slots on a per game basis. So all of those features are still included here. What about rewind? Yep, I can do that here too. I can rewind and resume from that location in the games that I bring in on the stick, just like I could with the pre-installed games. So wonderful. Now, what about multi-disc games? That was a question that I saw and one that I had myself. We played Conan in a previous video, so I've got the discs here. So I'm going to tap fire for Conan Disc 1, and then using the shoulder button, load Disc 2 as a secondary disc. Now, you can do this for up to 3 discs. If your game has more than 3 discs, you can still handle it. All you do is you create a playlist. Now, that's a little more advanced, but it's in the manual. It explains how to do that. So I'm going to start the game. Conan is loading, but oh, now it needs Disc 2. No problem. Well, how do you do that, John? How do you do it? Well, I know the code, but if you want to check and see yourself, we can pop out here and look. Swap floppy disk, home and south. Okay. Home and south, Disc 2, tap a key.
We're right into Conan. And I'm playing. Multi-disc games, no problem. 3 discs are covered right in the interface, and if you do a little extra work, you can even have more discs to swap out. All right, how about an XEGS game? I have a few of those in here. How about Mario Brothers? That was a popular game. Just go ahead and start it and see how it does. There it is. 1 player? Yeah. Got him. Get out of there, turtle. Now I'm going to pause this real quick. This is a great time to talk about controller compatibility because maybe you're not used to playing Mario with a controller like the CX40. How about something like an 8-bit Do controller? Yeah! Compatibility is just kind of baked right in. And if you're worried about where the buttons are mapped, remember, you could do a full remapping. And plus, look, I've not found a controller, PlayStation, Xbox, 8-bit Do, anything, that doesn't work. And in fact, Retro Games provided their own little chart to say of the different types of gamepads, how the default mapping is before you choose to remap it. So compatibility coming into the 400 Mini is just about universal. And this is a great time to look at the Atari 5200 emulation. So if I just hop in here and pick, let's pick Missile Command. That's a really easy one to see if things are working the way that they should. There's Missile Command. I'll just load it. Now, I can launch it as it is, but it's not going to work. Now, why is that? Well, if we head back out, we can see that we need to configure this and say that it is, in fact, a 5200. So I'm going to change that to the 5200, and then we get a whole bunch more options. So now the only controller type is the 5200 controller, and we can map the controls. We can see the layout for the 5200. Where do you want to map these buttons? It even sees that this controller is not the CX stick, so you can map on here just the way you want it. If you want to put the start button over here, you want to put the pause button over there, all that can be done. And when you have it laid out the way you like, you just back out. We know it's a 5200, so we can now start the game. So here is Missile Command. Now before I start playing Missile Command, there's one thing I should probably point out, and that is in the remapping of the controls. Once you're using a 5200, you have all these options to interpret digital controls as analog. Now the manual for the 400 Mini says if you have an analog controller connected, it'll be treated like an analog controller. But I don't think that's happening just yet in this firmware, and I'll show you why I think that. Analog speed is how quickly it accelerates when you lean the stick. Joystick sensitivity is the curve because the further you moved it, the faster it would move, and you can adjust that. And how quickly does it recenter when you let go of the stick. All those are options. I've tuned it to what I think works best-ish, but it's not perfect. So let's hop in the game and I'll show you. Now I have mapped some buttons to what I need on the 5200, but I can always get to the virtual pad by hitting start and menu, and I have a side slide out here so I can hit start from there. And then I can start playing. So I'm going to use the analog stick. I have it mapped. It doesn't feel purely analog to me, and I'll tell you why I say that in just a second. Whether I'm using the analog or the D-pad, I'm getting the same kind of responsiveness. That's not to say it's unplayable. That's not to say it's not good. It's certainly not as accurate or precise as a pure analog controller. And it's because I can get the same responsiveness from the D-pad. In fact, I don't want to just leave it up to my interpretation. Let me show you this test cartridge. So this is Pete's test cartridge, and this allows you to test the behavior of your controllers, of your console, if you have a 5200. And let me show you what's going on with these settings. So when I move, you can see it's accelerating. So the green dot is my the pointer indicating where I'm moving the stick. And it's not pure analog, because if I move it a little and hold it, it doesn't sit out there. It continues to move. So I believe the 400 Mini is still interpreting analog sticks as digital input. However, the fact that the manual says that analog sticks should be recognized as analog sticks, and I've tried multiple gamepads, by the way, it's just not quite there. Because if I use the D-pad, I get the same behavior as if I just use the analog stick. I hope you can see that on there. And look, over here, I've got my CX stick, and I'm getting the same behavior out of it. It's, of course, a digital control, not analog. What you would hope is that on an analog stick, if I move a little, it would go to this position and hold, because that's the location you want. But in fact, we're just getting acceleration and deceleration and a curve definition. Now, this is in no way meant to say that the 5200 is not playable and it's not good, but the analog control is just not quite up to snuff yet. I would hope it'd be a little more specific. I was really hopeful this would be a very one-to-one replacement for an analog 5200 controller. It's not quite, but it is playable, and I have faith that it's going to get there, hopefully in a future firmware update, because the software runs great. It's a wonderful platform to play on, just not quite duplicating that controller experience. Now, before I jump into the basic programming environment, which I'm getting to next, I want to show you the accuracy of the Atari hardware using this sysinfo disk. So what I have configured here is an Atari 400 with no BASIC. Cool, so let's launch that, and the sysinfo will tell me exactly what it is that I have. You can see the chipset, you can see that BASIC is not available, you can see we have 48K down there, yeah, so you can see what the system is. But if I switch it over to, say, a 130XE, now you can see, yeah, different system. We have BASIC C, we have 128K of memory, you can see the output, all that is configured based on those tick boxes. So it's stuff you would do manually in an emulator like a RetroArch or Altera is all done here, and you can see exactly what it's doing by jumping into an application like this. Now, automatically, as soon as you throw a properly formatted USB stick into the system, it's going to drop this virtual disk called the 400 BASIC. You can mount that and launch it, and you are now running in Atari BASIC. Now let me pull the keyboard a little bit closer to me here so that I can type, so I could start programming. There's my program. Let's run it. Lovely. I have a break key up here. It is going to be F8. That works. What about saving this? Yeah. Looks like it's saved. Let's drop to DOS. Let's run a disk directory. There we go. GXG.base, the file that I just created, is here. Now, the hang up here is that only exists inside of the virtual disk created on the 400 Mini. It's not a file that I can extract from that easily without some other tools. There's got to be a way. There's got to be a way to get more functionality. It's great to have a basic environment. Let's go back to basic. Our program's not there. Let's load it. Loaded. Let's list it. Let's run it. Yeah. One other note, a weird limitation, there are a few keys, even if you have a keyboard, you can't type. The left and right bracket and the Atari inverse video key don't exist. Now you can always hit the home and menu button and pop open this virtual keyboard on the side, and all those keys are available down here, but they're not available anywhere on a keyboard unless you pop open this sidebar. That feels to me like just an oversight that'll likely get fixed in a future firmware upgrade, but it's worth noting, if you're gonna do some programming, you gotta pop this open to type any of those three keys. So we have a baked-in basic environment. We can do programming, we can save it, and we can load it. What we can't do easily right now is like connect to other peripherals, save individual files to mounted disks. All of that you would think probably, definitely is possible. However, I'm not going to put Retro Games or plaion on the hook for this. They never promised this was going to be the end-all be-all replacement for every Atari you've ever owned, but it's awfully close, and you'd kind of think that maybe up in here would let me do some mounting of BASIC to some custom features. I think it's possible. If not by plaion, maybe a third party, somebody amazing over at Atari Age is going to find a way. But yeah, can you program in BASIC? You absolutely can. It works great. There's my suspended program running. A great program, by the way. 2 lines of BASIC. There's a lot to like about this 400 Mini. Is it perfect? No. Is it pretty amazing? Yeah. Can you play it with a GameStation Pro controller? Yeah, you kinda can, as I'm doing right here. Look, I could go on for hours about all the little experiments and nuances that I have found playing with the 400 Mini. That's for a future video. I think we have seen enough of what this cool little device has to offer to get a summary and give it a rating.
There is so much to explore with the 400 Mini. If there's any topic you saw in this video that you'd like to see expanded on in a future update, please let me know down in the comments. I read every single one and most definitely use your comments to plan my future videos. By now, I would expect you've seen enough to know if the 400 Mini is right for you, and if it is, I've provided links down in the description where you can pick one up right now. But as for a final evaluation and rating, well, there's plenty to consider. First and foremost, the mere existence of the 400 Mini brings me a lot of joy. My Atari 800 home computer and its associated library was a large part of my formative years, and seeing a new light shown on the 8-bit line is wonderful. The Mini is a well-produced and stable platform that comes packed with a couple of dozen titles, but its real superpower is the ability to run basically anything you want from a nearly forgotten cross-section of Atari software with ease. Now, I do have a few nitpicks, though. The preloaded games provide for flagging favorites and sorting, though that's unavailable when playing from the USB stick. And with thousands of available titles, it would have been nice to find a gem and red flag it as a favorite for future play. Controller remapping for USB games is a spectacular feature to make games playable even without a keyboard, but that very feature is missing from the pre-installed games, and there were times I really could have used it. And that brings me to the CX stick. This likely deserves a future video all its own, because this quality, multi-button USB CX40 controller is going to be a favorite for a lot of retro gaming fans. But with the creative location of the buttons around the stick and on the bottom shoulder, I did find myself pressing buttons accidentally on occasion. Now, this was easily mitigated with a controller remap, except for, as I noted, within the pre-installed 25 games where that feature just isn't available. And finally, there's the basic programming environment. Retro Games never promised the 400 Mini would be a complete Atari 8-bit replacement, but the fact that it comes so close and only really delivers a walled garden, well, it gives me hope for some future improvements in this area. Or maybe they're saving that for the 800 Maxi. Look at me writing checks that I have no authority to write. All that being said, I've decided to award the 400 Mini 4.5 tokens out of 5. Ultimately, whether you're a longtime fan of the Atari 8-bit line or just getting your feet wet with the library, the 400 Mini is a well-polished plug-and-play that deserves a spot in your collection. Now, of course, I will throw links here and here to some more 400 Mini coverage I've done recently. I certainly hope you found something to enjoy in this video, and I cannot wait to talk to you again next time. Bye-bye.